Gridlock of the City, Deadlock of My Life. Written by David Silbert. Man, my head. I came too slowly, with my blurred vision gradually becoming crisper and clearer to the point where I could make out the red bar stool that I must have been sitting on minutes or hours before. What the hell? I reached for the seat of the stool with my hand, thinking that I'd be able to hoist myself up off the ground. I only managed to lift myself a few feet before my grip loosened and I fell back, my head hitting the cold, hard floor. Could I get a hand, please? As I stared at the ceiling fan rotating above me, a young man bent over me. A nice-looking guy, probably in his late 20s. He appeared to be the type of person who'd always have a great story to tell at a party. Someone the ladies would never be able to shut their mouths about. I guessed he was the bartender who had served me tonight. Help me up. His strong hand lifted me from my position, pulling me back up as my consciousness returned to the everyday world. The world of sobriety. Thank you. Not my proudest moment, it would seem. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave, mister. You're making the other customers uneasy. As I looked around, I started to notice the burning glares of about 15 other faces, both old and young. Some looked more sympathetic than others, but nonetheless, I took this as a cue for me to be on my way. Here. I stuffed a few bills into the young bartender's hand. My tab, I retorted as I stumbled over to the door. I fumbled with the knob, pulled the door ajar, and was met by the coldest slap of air you could ever imagine. A wake-up call. As I gazed out onto the surrounding street, the city began to wedge its way into my senses. The sights, sounds, and smells of the night began to penetrate my being. I took my first few steps out onto the sidewalk. The night was pitch black, with only a few dimly lit street lamps illuminating the pathway in front of me, as if to provide respite within a world of darkness and shadows. The blaring horns of praised cabs and cars provided a dull roar in the background, while the creaky hiss of half-broken neon signs permeated my immediate surroundings. I could also smell something foul, like a bag of spoiled garbage that someone had left out for far too long. I looked down at my watch. The time was 12:47 a.m. I sighed. Great. Another night wasted. I guess I should head back to the apartment. I crossed the street and turned onto one of the main boulevards. As I stumbled along, still groggy and my head aching, I noticed a group of figures heading towards me from the opposite direction. 2 guys and a girl. They couldn't have been out of college yet. Maybe 19, 20 years old. They walked with a kind of pretentious swagger, as if they were looking for trouble.
Johnny, where are we going? I'm tired.
Shut it, Gene. We ain't leaving till we've finished enjoying our night together.
Jack, please tell your jerk of a brother to take me home.
Why do you always have to be so anxious all the time, Jeannie? Honestly, just do what he says and we'll get you home safe and sound. As I passed the trio, for a split second the girl caught my glance. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, as if she were pleading me to help free her from this hellhole of a situation. It was clear to me that the 2 boys weren't simply going to bring her home like she'd proposed. It was late at night, after all, in a poor part of town, and their facial expressions and body language weren't exactly cryptic in depicting what their intentions were. I could have helped, and then thinking back, maybe I should have. But rather, I continued on, hands in my pockets, my head kept down. She was asking for trouble the second she got involved with those creeps, I told myself. I convinced myself, despite a churning feeling in my stomach, that I could have done something to help the poor girl. You made a terrible choice, honey. Once a person goes down the wrong path, there ain't no coming back. No second chances. No redemption for the soul. What a world we live in, huh? I sauntered farther down the street, my footfalls heavy and my head throbbing with pain, a stark reminder of my reckless and apathetic nature. A little further down, I could make out someone sprawled out on the sidewalk. He was a feeble old man, with a bushy white beard that strangely reminded me of Rip Van Winkle. Except that for this poor soul, sleep seemed elusive for him. His eyes were pink, and curved lines stretched under his eyelids. He bore a stricken look on his face, as if he were teetering on the edge between life and death. In his hand was a needle, and around his arm an elastic band. I pitied the poor bastard, yet doubted that any help I could provide would make any difference to the druggie. There's no amount of intervention and rehabilitation that would be able to set this poor man straight. Once you know the taste of the drug, there's no getting rid of it. I wish you luck, friend, I whispered, with a tear in my eye, before averting my eyes and pushing ever forward into the menacing darkness. The wind began to blow, and a chilling breeze grazed my body. Jesus, it's cold, I thought to myself. As I wandered further and further downtown, I noticed that buildings were becoming less and less frequent, to the point where eventually the only thing that lay before me was a series of run-down lots for blocks on end. The bright lights and deafening sounds of the city were becoming fainter and fainter, replaced by dim moonlight and the sound of crickets chirping. Two things I would never expect to experience in the smoggy, cacophonous, urban slab of heaven I call home. That's weird, I thought to myself. The apartment's on 79th Street. I must have made a wrong turn somewhere back. The air became cooler, and the light continued to fade, but for some inexplicable reason, I continued forward. Something compelled me, and I'll never truly know whether it was simple intuition, or perhaps something more, something greater. I found myself attracted to a thin stretch of land to the right, where any signs of civilization and urbanization were gone. Vines and ivy were sprouting out of the gravel of the street, as if the earth was attempting to reclaim its natural state prior to its invasion and defilement by mankind. Grass was growing wildly, untamed, without a master to dictate what it can and cannot do. Trees surrounded me, tall and broad enough to give the skyscrapers of the city a run for their money. As I stepped from the pavement and onto wet, lush grass, soppy with the late night, more like early morning, dew, I had the sudden impulse to take off my shoes and socks and feel the ground beneath me. It was fluffy, like a cloud, which surprised me given the coarse, sharp road which bordered it. I felt as if the weight holding down my body had disappeared, and that the gravity which had been holding me down could at any time give way and let me float up into the night sky. Dandelions surrounded my feet as I walked, and before I knew it, I was standing in the middle of the lot, where a particularly tall tree compelled me to look up towards the horizon. The stars shone brightly in the night sky, which was now a deep, royal shade of blue. The moon was full tonight, and especially radiant. I felt a certain warmth that I've never felt before. It was indescribable, such a unique feeling. And yet I felt perfectly comfortable as I stared up into the depths of the celestial body. Without the street lamps I had lived with all my life, the moons and stars illuminated the world for me to gaze upon. And before I realized it, I began to see and sense aspects of the world that I had never seen and felt before. For the first time ever, I was able to smell the crisp, magnificent pine in the air from the thick trees that now surrounded me, a dark and dense forest. I could see rocks, large and small, smooth and rough, littering the ground and providing homes for moss and insects. Massive tree roots snaked their way around me, intertwining with each other as if holding hands at the end of one of those AA meetings. Behind me, I swore I could hear the soft, faint trickle of water, as well as the flop of tiny fishes' fins. Drip, drip, the water went, rolling over and under smooth pebbles, a soothing melody to my senses. Robins chirped, mockingbirds hummed, and woodpeckers pecked. The hiss of steam and warmth of water vapor wafted over to me like one of my mother's apple pies, fresh from the oven. I looked over my shoulder, expecting to see some sort of stream, but realized that my vision had begun to blur, still hazy from my late-night rowdiness. I staggered sideways, my entire body suddenly heavy and limp. I lost my sense of balance and found my face hitting the soft ground below me. It must have been some time before I came to, for when my consciousness seeped back to me for the second time this night, my eyelids felt even heavier than before. It took me quite some time to force them open and prop myself upright. A thick fog you could cut a hole through surrounded me. I wasn't sure if it was my eyesight or if this was really happening. Apprehensive, and admittedly a little freaked, I stood up slowly. In my solitude, alone in the hazy night, I wanted to speak out, to scream to the heavens, but I couldn't muster any words. Of all the occasions, and for the first time perhaps ever in my life, I had nothing to say. No snarky remark about how I could be in the bar right now. No complaints about how I'm spending my night stargazing of all activities. It was just me and the night sky above me. There was nothing between the two of us. No sights or sounds of the city. Just the chirps of grasshoppers, the splash of water droplets, and the soothing sound of the flowing wind. It was a surreal experience, and at that moment in my life, I realized that my senseless nights of drinking were over. It was time to head home, place my head on a pillow for a change, and go to sleep. As my feet left the soft grass and returned to crunching against the coarse pavement, I could sense the thousands of people who would, this very moment, traverse the same ground beneath me. Men and women commuting to work, boys and girls walking to school, the humans that make up this world. The sounds of heavy traffic, blaring car horns, and deafening sirens would soon permeate the air around me once more. Above me, the starry sky I was now all too familiar with enveloped the urban landscape, blanketing the city. A rarity in such a squalid place, but hell, I'll take what I can get. Dawn was just over the horizon, and soon these stars would be obscured from view until they decided to come out once again. It was a melancholy feeling. At that moment I was saying goodbye to the old world I used to know. An unknown horizon lay before me, but I was ready to take it on. During a night that was otherwise average in every sense of the word, the beautiful night sky above me differentiated it from the rest. I don't know how to explain it, nor do I really feel the need to. If you had been there with me on this night, you too would understand just how moving a sight like this can be.